I am so happy to see you all here today. It is always such a pleasure to speak to the wider University of Tennessee community. It's an honor and a privilege. So thank you for having me today. I came to the University of Tennessee actually 15 years ago to start the online program at the College of Social Work. So I've been doing this for a really, really long time. I've developed the program. I've done a ton of research on the program, evaluation, changes, all the way through. I teach our PhD students how to teach in both face-to-face and online modalities. And what I have found over the years is that really a feminist approach is what works best for me. So I'm going to talk to you all about that today. So take what you like, leave what you don't. But let's get started. All right. So in order to start talking about feminist practices, I think it's important to kind of understand what all of the key terms are. So in general, feminism is the belief system that centers on equal rights for women. Pedagogy, however people want to say it, there's all sorts of ways, is the practice of teaching. And then when we look at critical feminist pedagogy, that's teaching practices which center on feminist theories, especially as it relates to intersecting identities relating to oppressive practices. So when I think about being a feminist professor, I think about acting more like a guide for students than the sage. So students get to have agency over the learning process and how they want to access knowledge and create new knowledge. Also, a great thing about this approach is that it's not exclusive to any field of study. Any field can engage in feminist pedagogies, whether that's social work, where I am, or math, engineering, business, psychology, nursing. Everyone can benefit from this approach. So that's great. Also, my first thought is just to talk about removing the arrogance that sometimes surrounds feminist theory. A lot of folks think they cannot access or embrace feminist approaches because they're not well read in that area and they don't know all the different waves of feminism and all of that. I just want to say, just take all of that away and just think about this as an approach to cultivating a culture of care with students. So very pragmatically, I see the online classroom uniquely set up for a feminist pedagogy because the very baseline of online teaching is that it's accessible for more people who want to attain education. So that's great. It's also inside of the online class, it's a unique space for leveling the playing field for privilege. So it's financially more accessible for students. So sometimes it's really impossible for people to move to a large college campus to live, especially if they have children. Also, transportation can be very expensive. Safe transportation can be hard to find for people. And also, thinking about people with different abilities, disabilities, sometimes they struggle with mobility on college campuses. So this is a really great way to level that playing field. Also, I think about the online classroom being an easier spot, if you will, to communicate. So, when we think about our students who are very shy, introverted, this is a space where they can speak up through a chat, through emails, through groups, without having to raise their hand and speak on their own, which I think is another great aspect of the feminist philosophy. So just really quickly, the way I view feminism is I combine that theoretical perspective with community of inquiry. So those of you who don't know, community of inquiry is the gold standard for how we deliver online education. It's very well researched. It's been used in lots of ways over time. So what it does is it combines social, cognitive, and teaching presence. A limitation, though, of COI is that it does not address intersecting identities and issues surrounding gender. So those two perspectives combined with this perspective, I think is good for students. So the critical feminist perspective in education emphasizes content delivery methods that center on experiences, collaboration, learning communities, and relationships. So that's rooted in social constructivism. And it's combined with those three tenets of COI really makes a great place for students to be able to engage together in greater learning, and to make that online space more engaging and to feel like you are more connected to your college community. All right. So what do feminist perspectives look like? For me, it's considerations of students from diverse backgrounds. It's me being aware of my biases and working on that diligently every day for the rest of my life. I will never be done with that. It's the development of learning communities within classes. I value collaboration, community, and empathy with myself to students, student to student. I try to really work hard to center my students so they are the main character in the play, not me. So when I center my students, I hope to remove feelings of alienation that they may feel in the classroom. I have a lot of awareness about how I respond to my students, and I try to respond to them very quickly. So if they email me or speak up in class, I try to acknowledge that and let them know that when they speak up or when they connect with me, that's really important to me. And then I also have a strong focus on critical self-reflection. Again, that's for my students. It's also for me. It's something that I work on all the time. So what do we know about online students? Primarily in social work, also nationwide, online students are typically female, caregivers, parents, working more than 30 hours a week, with intersecting identities and a lot of stress. And I think we know that due to the pandemic, social unrest, massive issues with inflation, those feelings of stress are really exacerbated right now. So what can we do as a faculty to make sure that our students are receiving a quality education, a rigorous education, but also one in a way that's meaningful for them and doable? All right, so when I think about starting my developing a class from a feminist perspective, I first think about how I'm developing my Canvas site, because that's how I present myself first to students who are in an online class. So I always have a warm welcome. I think some people may be shy about having a video on their Canvas site or a picture of themselves. Just do it. It's really important for your students to see you're a real person. It helps them to feel like they're more connected to you. And if you have a GRA that works with you as your TA in class, have their picture up, have them put a video up as well. It's good practice, but it also helps students to see, oh, this is the TA that's helping out. I feel comfortable with this person now. I try to keep my site very organized, and this is where you can call on the help of OLAP and OIT to come in and look through your site and help you make sure that it makes sense from the perspective of a student. I like to communicate my expectations clearly. I don't know if all of you have heard of Brene Brown, but she's like really big social worker from University of Texas. But she always says, you know, clear is kind. So I want to be kind to my students and always let them know what they can expect from me. I also communicate my teaching philosophy because it's kind of different from a lot of other professors. And sometimes that can feel unsafe for students. Like, I'm used to it being this way and it has to be this way. And so when they come to my class, sometimes that feels a little different. So I'm like, this is where I come from. This is why I do what I do. And let's give it a try and see how it works. And usually, you know, after a few weeks, students are like, okay, I like this. This is okay. I generate excitement about the class before the class even starts. I talk about what the value of this class is, and I try to make it super relatable for a lot of different people. Like, why is this important? I have students do an introduction of themselves through Flipgrid, and I'll see if this works in just a second. In terms of the books I select for class, I tried to select books from diverse authors. So I think outside of the box. I don't use the same books that have typically been used. And if I can't find books from diverse authors, then I pull in literature, articles from diverse authors so that students have access to different ways of thinking. Because you know what, at the end of the day, it would be so boring if we all thought the same way. And I think we would not come to conclusions that are really amazing without diversity of thought. So the classroom is a great place to start that. Also, I like to let my students know about all the things that University of Tennessee has to offer them for support. I let them know about the Office of Disability Services. I explain to students, like, sometimes in your mind, you might think that a disability is only vision related or hearing related, or, you know, mobility related. But sometimes, you know what, disabilities can look like ADHD or learning disabilities or depression or anxiety. And I encourage students to please reach out to ODS so that they can, or SDS, see if they are qualified for an accommodation, which will help them the entire time they're in the online program. I let them know about the library services, emergency funds that are available within our college in case something happens and they can't afford to eat or pay a bill, or their computer dies or whatever happens. We want them to be successful. The Writing Center, and also mental health services that are available for online students. Let's see if this works. So I made this weekend. Oh my gosh. Here we go. I did this weekend pretending like I was a student. So this is me introducing myself to the class like I'm a student.
Hey, my name's Kate Chaffin. I'm the mother of two. I work a full-time job. I have a dog named Lucky, a cat named Eddie, and I'm really excited to be in this class because I really enjoy social welfare policy, and I want to learn more about how I can advocate for my clients with legislators. Thank you.
All right, there we go. But you can do this with students so that they can see each other. It kind of breaks up the monotony of the discussion board, and is at the very start of a class is an opportunity for them to see each other and build some community in terms of, oh, I have, you know, two kids, or I have a dog that's a border collie and crazy. But anyways, whatever you want to do. So, classroom policies to consider. Okay, attendance is one. So I like to try to be really careful about being very strict about my attendance policies, because I understand that online students have a lot of things going on. And I do believe that if you set up a culture of care and you set up an environment that's engaging, people really won't want to miss your class. They're going to want to be there. And the only times they won't be there is because they're really sick, or their kids are sick, or something bad's happening. Also, when I remove an attendance policy, I haven't had problems with people showing up for class at all. But also, what it does is it removes that need for students to tell me when something really bad has happened, because sometimes that feels like a real violation of their privacy, and I don't need to know everything. So do what feels good for you. That's what I've done for me. It's worked out fine. Just giving you some ideas here. Recording classes. I typically record my lectures so people can go back and look at them. However, I do not record when we're discussing as a class, because sometimes people say things that are very personal. They don't want people to go back and see that. So I try to be really careful to only record myself, but not other students talking. Cameras, I give students an option of keeping their cameras on or off. I always say, I love seeing your beautiful faces, but if you don't feel like showing it today, I understand sometimes I don't want to show my face either. So you do what you need to do, and you don't have to explain it either. And most people keep their cameras on, but it's always good to have the option. Groups. I like to try to break people up in groups to work on things that in the class, because I think that builds community, which is really important. It gives people an opportunity to talk about the knowledge and skills that we're learning. And also, in general, I try not to have high stakes groups assignments, because that causes online students a lot of stress, because sometimes it's like, probably you could be a general in the military with the upper level logistics that it takes to get everyone together for a group project. You've got people all over the world in different time zones, working different jobs with children, all sorts of stuff. It just becomes really a nightmare and really stressful, and really students don't need to be put through that kind of stress. So if I do have a group assignment, I try to make it lower stakes so that the stress isn't so high. Communication, I let them know how that they can reach me, how quickly I will return their email. I always say on the weekends, you might not hear from me because I have a family and they're important to me. So I'm not always checking my email on the weekends. If I do, I will respond, but you might not hear from me. So try to get me during the week. And I do respond to emails within 24 hours during that time. And I have office hours. So students know they can drop in for those office hours. They can also meet with me by appointment. All right. So when I'm thinking about setting up the online class, I'm thinking about universal design. So again, I want to have an inclusive welcome. I have a video. I would encourage everyone to do that. It makes your site really nice and students like it. I have clear and consistent navigation. I think about, are the tools I'm using meaningful and accessible? So when we have too many bells and whistles, it becomes hard for some students to access that and learn new technology. So if you're going to have something new, maybe just have one thing that's new, so people aren't learning a bunch of new things. They're only learning one thing for this class, because you have to think other professors are probably doing some different things too. Make sure your text is readable, contrast of colors, less is best. I know Danny knows a lot about colors and graphic design. Make sure documents and leaks are accessible for your students, and turn on the captions, which I forgot to do, so shame on me. All right. Building community and online courses, asynchronous or synchronous. So in synchronous classes, to build community, I flip the classroom. I have students do a lot of work before they come to class. I might have pre-recorded short lectures and readings. You know, you can go through OLAP for production to make some really fun and exciting lectures that you can use over and over, which is really good. And then I can use that class time for discussion and group activities. So I've really maximized my time with my students when we're meeting synchronously. If you're thinking about an asynchronous approach, I want to limit my graded group activities, like I talked about before. It's very stressful. I really try to think about how can I do some really creative things in this class without having a lot of discussion boards, which students get really tired with. So I'm thinking, like, how can I make students use their creative skills in a way that isn't writing really long papers? So we might do more role plays and videos. That might look different in your field. So I would just encourage you to think creatively, because students do get really tired writing very long papers and discussion boards as their two main ways of doing things in classes. And also, the other thing I wanted to say about discussion boards is to limit them and maybe have really tight rules around them. What I've found over time is that students can say things that are really hurtful in discussion boards. And if you're not watching it closely, like monitoring it all the time, which is really impossible because faculty are busy, things can be said and they're left like that for a while. It looks bad for you that you didn't pick up on it. And it ends up hurting students. So I would just say be very careful with that. All right. Also, when you're developing class from a feminist perspective, I'm thinking about the implicit curriculum. So that's the hidden curriculum. So it's outside of the lecture, outside of your assignments. It's essentially the way you communicate to your students by your actions, by your policies, by visuals that you have in your lectures, things like that. So for example, for me, diversity is really important. So it also happens to be an important part of critical feminism. So I communicate beyond my lecture by doing some things like having diverse authors, having diverse pictures in my lectures. I have guest speakers come to class from diverse locations so that students can see themselves in professional fields that aren't just, this one homogenic way of looking at social work or business or whatever. I want my students to see themselves doing these things. I always encourage self-care because that's really important, especially as an online student, to take some time for yourself, because if you can't do that, you can't perform well in your classes. You start getting stressed out and every little thing bothers you. You get really mad at your faculty, you get mad at the program, all these things are happening that really, when you put it into perspective, isn't that bad. You just have to take some good care of yourself. And also I give weekly announcements to my students. I let them know what's due for the week. That might be a little mothering. But I have to remember, I'm not the only class. They're taking other classes too. And it's just a nice way to say, hey, don't forget, you've got this going on. I might add clips from news media that I think that they will like. I might tell them something fun that's going on, like, don't forget, there's a basketball game coming up. I love basketball, by the way. And I also just try to communicate genuine care for my students. And then let me make sure I'm on. Okay, I'm good on time. The grading. Okay, so grading, probably the hardest part of being a professor. I want everyone to know that our students, it's really, really difficult for us too. So I explain to my students how I grade and why I grade that way. So they just know out of the gate. Again, I've communicated clear expectations. I think about the terms of formative versus summative assessment. So for me, formative assessment is more meaningful. So the summative is like high stakes. I might have a midterm and a final, and that's it. And I'm assessing knowledge, and I don't really know what else is going on with the student. I don't know if this just rote memorization, or do they really understand it? So For me, the formative approach is better. So I might give an assignment, they work on it, I give feedback, they incorporate that, move forward to the next step, and we really try to scaffold along the way so that I know they're getting it and I can feel confident that they are understanding this material. Also, they got a lot of care along the way. I've really shown a very strong teaching presence. Students like rubrics, so I'm clear with rubrics where I take off points beforehand so they know what is the most important thing I need to work on. And then just some things you can be thinking about long term is like ungrading approaches, contracting for grades, student reflections, things like that, so that when we remove the pressure that students feel for getting an A, then students can clear the room and start working on learning. Because what happens is when they're so stressed about getting the A, I don't even know how much they're really learning and how much they're loving learning. So I start thinking about how can I remove that stress, and I do that by formative assessment. And I can also do that by contracting for grades. So if you do all of these assignments and you do them well, you can get an A. But you can also just choose to do these assignments and that's an A-, or that's a B if you do these. And then I can have students look at their work and say, if they were grading the work, what would they give themselves? And I'll tell you what, students are very honest. It is very rare that someone will say, I needed an A+ for this. They're pretty honest with what they feel they've done with their work once they're really faced with grading it themselves. So moving forward, implementation, I would suggest just take small steps when you're developing your online class. Take one or two things, try it out, see how it feels. Always give midterm evaluations to your students. I even do evaluations after every class just to see, like, what did they learn today? What was good? What did they wish they know more about? Again, communicating a culture of care. I care what you're learning, and I am exhibiting a strong teaching presence. A midterm evaluation gives me more granular information about how the semester's going, gives me a chance to recover if something's not going well so I can fix it by the end. And then I evaluate how my informal activities through that class went well, so then I can add them in later in a more formal way. So I leave you with a quote from Bell Hooks, who is a personal hero for me. But to teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we are to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin. If we want to understand more about critical feminist pedagogy, I would encourage you to check out Teaching to Transgress. I got with our librarian, Steve Molesky, who's amazing. He got that book for digital downloads, so you don't even have to go to the library to read it. You can just download it and read it. It's very inspirational, and really kind of helps you see from a quite different perspective what students are hearing and what students need. And then I think I had said earlier to you all that there's a lot of diversity in feminism. It's not monolithic. So people can see themselves from a feminist perspective, regardless of where they are in life. You don't have to fully commit to the cause to be a feminist. So that is a really great thing about it. At the end of the day, it's about being aware of the power and how that looks in the classroom. So I'm going to stop sharing and answer questions and see what you all might be doing in a feminist classroom, or if you have questions about it.
Kate, there was one question a little up the thread from Michelle.
Okay.
And it was, how do you address invisible types of diversity for the students? Example, diverse viewpoints, perspectives, chronic illness that cannot be seen as disability, and the LGBTQ plus community, etc.
Yes. So that's addressed in a lot of different ways. So just try to be creative, and also remember that when I'm talking to students, that people come to the table from a lot of different perspectives. So I remind students of that as well. So the very first day of class, I kind of set the rules. I didn't say this, but we have some rules about how we are going to conduct the class respectfully, that we're going to have, and this isn't in every profession, in terms of what we talk about in social work probably isn't the same things that are talked about in math. Maybe they are. I'm betting it's not. But anyways, we talk about everyone was raised with different political ideologies. Everyone was raised with different parents. Parents look very different for different people. So whatever you have in your mind about what a heterogenic, homogenous family looks like, get rid of that, because I just want everyone to start thinking like a blank slate. So that's kind of how we start. And then when something comes up in the classroom that is uncomfortable, we address it right away. So we think about addressing the statement that was written or spoken in a way that doesn't attack the person who said it, because the person may or may not be problematic. I'm not the judge of that. What was problematic were the words that were used. So we address that, like, this is why it was a problem. Let's be careful. This is how it can make people feel uncomfortable moving forward. And then again, the other perspective is using diverse perspectives. Like, I am introducing this model of teaching, which is a queer theory, or I'm introducing this model of teaching, which comes from indigenous backgrounds and decolonizing. So people are exposed to a lot of different ways of thinking about things, which I think is also helpful.
Kate, there was really good dialogue as you were talking about assessment and grading practices, just about like ungrading. And I think William brought up the point where sometimes perhaps students aren't quite prepared for that type of environment. And I'm wondering maybe if we could talk about just like then the transition and what you've learned in that transition to kind of help set expectations on the stage and help students really come to terms with a very different way of assessing. And this is for anybody who has this experience that can share some wisdom and insights.
I'm going to just quickly say something, and then I would love to hear what other people do. But I just want to say it's very nuanced. I think that it's probably harder to get away with that. And, classrooms where there's 500 and 600 people. I think that it's for it to happen in a way that helps students to feel safe. I think it has to be a smaller class so that you can be connecting with people on your own without TAs. You really need to be giving one consistent message from yourself. But that's just my idea of that. But I would love to hear what other people think.
Hey, Kate, it's Bill. I posted that. And the thing that the thing that I learned, and you brought this up, was we have to socialize our philosophy with our students and to make sure that they understand why we're doing that. I think most of my students who were critical of the approach have come around on it, because and I've had students who have come back to me and say, I didn't like it, but it allowed me to try some things that I probably wouldn't have tried if I was just focusing on getting 95%. And that's what I really want to hear. And then that allows me to have a discussion with them about, grading to me, and I teach a lot of writing and I teach a lot of PR and strategic planning, and that's a creative process. And it's hard to put uh, percentage points on that. You know, I'm looking for continued improvement over the course of the semester, and I really think that how they end the semester really reflects more of the type of student that they are and the amount of mastery that they've got. And the ungrading allows me to go back and say, okay, you did the assignment, but here's where it's short. And here's where you need to bring it up because you're going to put it in your portfolio or it's going to become part of a bigger project. And it gives them that opportunity to go back and fix it, and get it up to the standard that you still hold out there without the demerit to the grade. And once they see it work in progress, in process, they come around a lot better. But they are skeptical about getting outside of that. I won't know where I'm at in the class. And it does take a leap of faith, I think, on their part.
Absolutely. You make such a great point about them not knowing where them thinking they won't know where they're at in the class. But actually, if it's done correctly, they actually have more information about themselves. It just doesn't have a grade attached to it. So yeah, thank you for that.
We had another question from Michelle, and this may be for the whole group, but for those of you who do intro videos, how do you reconcile students having to show themselves in a video and not being required to do so in class?
I don't know that I would ever require a student to make an intro video. That said, students just usually do that. I can't think of a time where they haven't, just because I always have to remember that I'm always speaking to the larger university community from a social work perspective. So social workers are very social people and they crave community. So for me, it's a different experience. So I think that going back to being careful to require things if it makes someone uncomfortable, because maybe they're giving something up about their identities that they're not ready for. I don't know what it looks like in their homes. You know, what is their home? You know, I know that there's a large homeless population with students. I think I just try to be really kind and considerate about what I require students to do. I hope that helps, Michelle. So that, I'm sorry, that just made me think, I think some people, I'm working with Derek. We're working on something, a rubric. So I thought about, like, if you don't require it, then maybe only 1 or 2 students will post a video, and that seems kind of lame. Like, so how do you get more people to post a video to build the community? So the 1 or 2 who post don't feel left out. So I think if you don't require it, and have points assigned to it, then maybe you just, again, give the value proposition. Why is this important? It's important because building community in online classes helps you do better in class. It helps you with engagement, like give people the why. Does that help?
Okay, in nursing, it is a little bit different, because of the industry. But a lot of times what I'm seeing is a rolling participation grade, and it's very low stakes, but it's still there. And introductions are usually in with that. And that's one of the ways that we're kind of getting around it. The other thing that I'm starting to try and introduce to faculty right now is the concept of a pre-course survey. And I'm actually working on developing one that includes things like, questions about how comfortable are they on camera? Are there elements in their home that may prevent them from being on camera and all? Because I've heard curriculum meetings, faculty meetings, people on both sides saying, you know, their camera needs to be on all the time, so I know that they're paying attention. And then I have others that are like, you know, it'll eventually come out in the assessment, in their work, or whatever, if they're not paying attention. So it's trying to find that middle ground and what is most appropriate for your students that you're teaching, because it's not going to be the same across.
Yeah, Derek, I love that. Will you share your pre-course survey with me so I can look at that?
Yeah, when it's done, I'll send it to you.
Thank you. I love that idea. I just try to think like sometimes, you know, it's a mess behind them. There's kids running all over the place, whatever's happening. So people don't want to show that. And I think some faculty are convinced it has to look professional behind them, but that's just not reality. Not everyone can have a professional background all the time.
All right, we have about 1 more minute. So any last questions? What was the name of the book referenced?
That is Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. That's her moniker. It's Gloria Watkins, but it'll be under Bell Hooks. This is going really slow. I wanted to show you what people said about their favorite professor. There we go. Vulnerable is such a good one. I just want to say, I know we're out of time, but I just want to say that if you can be vulnerable, that'll really help you have good conversations in your classroom. Because if you can remove that ego that messes things up and gets defensive, you can have really great conversations with your students and model to them how to not let their egos get in the way either, so they can hear good information without getting upset about it. But thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to speak to the entire university community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was great. Hi, Tin.
Thank you.
Thank you.